Our next conversation is also going to be really amazing. It's called Power of the Pod, Empowering Creators. If you didn't meet me at the beginning, I'm Stella, Managing Director of Service 95, and having launched a podcast ourselves, Dua Lipa at Your Service, I can tell you that it is very difficult launching a podcast. So what they're doing at Fellas Studio really is very impressive. It's one of Europe's leading podcast studios, and they're behind some of your favorite creator-led podcasts. Callum unfortunately can't be here today, but we have Elliot Hackney, who's COO, and will be interviewed by Ciara Riordan, who is an award-winning journalist. So over to you guys.
Hello, everybody. Thank you
Hey,
so
everyone.
much for coming. We hope you enjoy our conversation. So, Elliot,
Yes,
the Fellas Studios, you're doing great work.
thank you.
Tell us about when it started and how it has evolved since it started.
So it started off with our founders, Cal and Chip, making the Fellas podcast around just as lockdown was kicking off. And Cal was trying to get Chip to do a podcast, but the only way that Chip would do it is if they made an amazing set. So they made a bar set, the first set that they ever did. You could only just get in the room. The producer couldn't be in the room whilst they were filming. Small room, and it evolved from there. Brand new, sets, new shows. And yeah, after the Fellas came Pitchside, our football show. Then it was Grace, and so on and so on. So yeah, it all started with Cal and Chip, our founders.
And lockdown, so that was quite hard, even though lots of people were making podcasts at the time.
Yes.
So coming out of lockdown, did you have a plan? Okay, we are going to expand.
Well, Cal and Chip did, yeah. I didn't come onto the business until just as we signed Grace. So it was Cal and Chip. They started off with their podcast and then with Pitchside. After they saw the success that they were having with the Fellas, they thought we can replicate this model with some of our friends and other creators that we know and be able to try and, make more and more of these podcasts and build a slate.
And with Saving Grace, so people probably in the audience would know her from I'm a Celebrity, and that's definitely where I knew her from, even though she was popping up on my social media timeline. But what was she doing? How did you sign her? Like, what was she doing before then?
So Grace, again, another creator who really did well out of lockdown. She was filming her commentary as she does on TikTok, sometimes from being just hungover. She went viral for filming a runner outside a house, I believe, who was like running every day saying, "Oh, I can never do that," and as she does. And as with a lot of the talent we end up working with at the Fellas Studios, we tested her out on one of our shows first. So she came as a guest on the Fellas. Was amazing, very funny, as she naturally is. Yeah. And we went from there and gave her her own show. I think a lot of people in this room will probably know Saving Grace. And yeah, she went from strength to strength.
In terms of listening figures, so she goes on I'm a Celebrity. Did they literally go through the roof?
Yeah, there was definitely a big push. I think one of the most exciting and strange things for Grace, and even some of the other talent that we spoke to that went on I'm a Celeb, it was the change in demographics. So Grace's audience is, primarily quite Gen Z. She brought on a lot of older people to her demographic, and she was getting stopped in airports or shops or other places by, 80-year-olds, 70-year-olds doing the weekly shop. In turn, some of the other people that we spoke to on there who maybe came from daytime TV or other areas got a younger demographic. So, yeah, it was quite interesting to see how that changed. But for Grace, it was definitely, she brought on some of her, not her usual audience.
Yeah, totally. And then in terms of social media, so in terms of podcast, years ago it was just audio, but now it's visual, and then it's also video on social. Yep. And so you've obviously seen that naturally develop.
Yeah, so ever since, we started the studio, or Cal and Chip started the studio, we were social first video from the off. We only see the benefit of social first video for our shows first. We believe that that's the way that it works. That's the way that it drives people to the long form, whether that be the video, whether that be the audio. We nailed short form video first and foremost, and that's what we believe helps our pods be successful. And every single podcast that we have is video, and we would implore anyone who's just doing audio to do video as well, because it adds so much more, and the barrier to entry gets lower and lower, by the year.
And so, like, how production-wise, how are you doing it then? So you've got an audio studio with a camera, is it?
Yeah, so all of our studios are built with cameras. We use Blackmagic across our studio. We have got the setup where there's maybe 3, 4, 5 sets in each room. There's no clashes because they film so irregularly, once a week, maybe they bank a couple of eps. But all our studios are set up for video, live streaming. Any show can go live at the click of a button. And we believe that video, in the way that we've set up the studios, is also future-proofed, so we can make upgrades as we go for, you moving forward throughout the years. But every studio has got its own cameras, own lighting, own sets. Everything's fixed.
And in terms of a production team, how does that work then across your podcast? How many podcasts do you have?
We've got 16 right now across the site.
16, wow. And so, production team-wise, how does that work?
So every show will have its own producer. Every show's got its own producer. We believe that producers are closest to the content. A lot of studios that we know, will have a social team separately. We believe that producers are closest to the show and know what will work and should know what works on social from being so close to it. There was a time where producers did everything. They were editing, they were posting, they were doing the production of the actual record itself. But we got to the stage where we've now got teams, a big support team from editors to graphics, but each producer, we remain, and we believe the strength is that they stay closest to social for the posting of clips and for the management of the episodes, titling, and also feeding back on the thumbnails as well after A/B testing's done its thing, because we believe that those guys should be closest to the show and what goes out.
And the thumbnail, as we know, I work in social media, is so important.
Very important.
What to you makes a successful podcast?
First and foremost, regularity. Whenever we work with any new talent at the studio, we make sure that they understand the commitment first and foremost. You have to have an episode going out every week, if not more in some cases. Some of our shows do live streams for the sports shows. Some shows might post more than once a week, but there's a commitment, and we believe that, all our shows are successful if it's there every single week. We don't let anyone take a break, for better or worse, but we're more than happy with them coming in and banking episodes, if they were to go away or, want a holiday or other things. But we believe that success, first and foremost, comes from regularity. But then after that, nailing the short form content, whether that be on TikTok, Instagram Reels, whether it be on YouTube Shorts, that is what's going to drive people back to the long form and back to the actual source of the podcast that matters, where you can monetize. Short form first and foremost, that is so important, and it's so easy to, you can spam as many clips as you want on, TikTok, for example, and just wait and see what works. And then when you found your niche or what works, craft your long form to be able to make and reproduce more of those moments. Short form is, massive for us.
And in terms of stats for audio figures, do you take them into consideration?
No, absolutely. Audio is still super important. I mean, 2/3 of our podcasts are consumed by video. There's a third that's audio. That's still super important, and monetizes, of course, which is also super important. But video and the opportunities on video are so much greater in terms of, where you're driving audience, who's consuming that, and how you can also sell that video organically as well.
Yeah, because you have to think of that as the selling and campaigns. And what are clients looking for from you?
Every show is different. It could be your standard 1 to 2 minute ad read, coming on the show and just, exploring how that audience are interested in your product or your service, all the way through to a 360 campaign, taking the inventory across everything from, the YouTube clips, the podcast, the audio, live streams, short form, and maybe everything else in between as well. So, we work with brands in a number of different ways, and, all the way from just your standard 1 to 2 minute ad read, product placement, all the way up to 360 campaigns.
Are some clients that come to you are I have no idea about social media. I have no idea about podcasting, but we know that you're cool and we want to work with you.
Yeah, that does happen. Yeah, of course. I mean, there's an education piece, and we're explaining how we work, and that's sits with the campaigns team, campaigns and partnerships team, and we feel like we can educate quite well. And once people do come and work with us and can see some of the benefits and the rewards and the view counts and everything else, then they are like, okay, how do we book more? How do we work with you longer term?
In terms of your model then for creators,
Yep.
because you have a unique model that I haven't heard from any other kind of podcast company. So can you tell the audience what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So when Cal and Chip started the studio and then went into, making more shows with more people, I think it was around the time when nearly everyone was getting a Spotify deal. Every man and his dog was, getting an exclusive Spotify video show. And what was happening there, or what seemed to be happening with a lot of people, is you wouldn't own any of your IP. Spotify or whoever else it may be in the space would obviously work with you for an extended period of time. You'd create an IP together and build that IP, but at the end of the day, you wouldn't own that IP. And that was a key issue. What we've built and what we have with creators is what we call the shared destiny model, where we're all in it together. We share IP, we share revenue, and if it works for everyone, then that's perfect. There's some instances where a show might not work out. That's fine, but we're in there to grow this together as a shared project and own everything together, which is quite unique in the space.
And how long would you give the creator to start making money?
Every show's different. So, there's some that we know are just going to hit the ground running because of the talent involved. Like literally we'll be monetizing well from the off. Okay. There's some that, take a little more time. We'd say on average it's between 4 to 6 months before we start seeing a really good amount of revenue. But there are certainly some outliers. There's some shows that maybe we've waited and taken maybe a year or so and really then started hitting the stride. But every single show is different, and we can never sit there and just say, yeah, this is going to be a winner from the off, unless we know it is because of the people involved.
Yeah. In terms of did you say you've 16 podcasts?
16 shows right now.
So what is your most successful podcast, and why do you think that is?
There's two who I'd say, and Cal and Chip probably won't appreciate it, but Grace, I'd say is up there, but it's between Grace and Fellas. They are the two really big flagship shows that we've got, but there's a lot that are hot on their heels, whether it be Waffling, whether it be Arthur and Batch, the pitch side. There's a lot of shows that are chasing them down.
Chloe versus the world. So I watched that series of Love Island, don't judge me. And I saw her on social media popping up on her podcast. So do I remember reading that she actually approached you guys?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We are inundated with talent. I think we've had every Love Island in the world. Maybe get in touch. And it's a selective process. We have to be so selective. We've only got so much studio space. We'd love to take on maybe some of the podcasts that we've had to turn down, but we've only got so much capacity. We want to grow at a steady rate and a good rate. And yeah, Chloe definitely came to us. And her podcast, Chloe versus the World, has been going amazing. Did a live show last week. Chloe's first venture into a live show with a brand partner. But yeah, Chloe's going really well. But we are inundated with talent, and unfortunately, we have to be super selective.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. So when you're commissioning podcasts, so what are you looking for?
First and foremost, we want a unique idea. Like we want some creative that maybe hasn't been done before, something that might catch people's eyes on short form, something that's, a really good, bright, new idea. One of those, for example, was Radio Rufus, TikTok comedian who we were working with. And we built him a 360 set that's enclosed. No one else has done that in the space, so you can't actually stand in there with cameras. They're all mounted. The producer desk is built into the show itself, and they do it as if it's an actual radio show going on. So ideas like that, like we'd love to see more things where we can push the boundaries and push the boat out in terms of like what we can do in the space that's maybe not been seen before. And as well as that, they've got to have a good audience of their own, and we've got great engagement. People actually want to hear more from people, and a lot of the time, obviously, we're speaking with short form talent, short form creators, and it's will their audience follow them from short form to long form? That's also a big question, because a lot of short form content nowadays is, you're swiping on a screen, you see their content, you might like that person, you might even follow that person, but you're off again. You're scrolling through the rest of the feed, and will you actually go and follow that person to a new platform doing a longer form piece of content? That's also a question we have to think about.
Yeah, and when you were saying long form, you're talking about YouTube.
Yes, long form audio or video, but
Okay.
YouTube mainly.
And it is important, do you think, that they have a following, their own
Yeah,
following?
absolutely. We haven't started a podcast with anyone without any audience. Like we're obviously speaking to talent who have got audiences that can potentially move from where they already are. Maybe people come together as a collective. And we've got a number of different talent. But yeah, we usually are working with someone that has caught our eye from the own content that they're making.
Yeah, very good. That's me out then. Podcast shows, the live tours, like that's obviously a massive thing. And again, that's relatively new-ish. I follow some podcasts, and I've seen one podcast that I follow. I went to their show, and the show wasn't actually as good as their podcast. I think they just tried to do too much, and it just did kind of lost what the show was about. It's generally very funny, and it wasn't that funny. But anyway, in terms of your podcasts and live shows, so that's obviously new to your business as well.
Yeah, so the show that has done the most touring, and probably I can give the best example, is Grace. Grace is on to coming in September, her third UK and Ireland tour. She started out 2 years ago, 3,000 people across the total tour. The last one was 16, and the latest one's going to be 26,000 people across all the different dates, which shows the growth that Grace is on and the show that's on. It is by no means a simple production. It's not, like we are now, rock up with 2 chairs, do a podcast, get a guest. It's a show. She has an end routine. Last year it was with some Magic Mike dancers, which is for her audience, definitely not mine. And she has, a number of games, fan interaction, all these different bits. 2 shows at the Palladium. She did a show at Christmas, a Christmas special at the Wembley OVO last year. So yeah, it's a huge production. It's definitely not just a podcast. I wish it was, because the costs would be so much easier to manage. But yeah, it's definitely not just a show, not just a podcast anymore. It's a full-on show.
Yeah, but generally people love seeing their podcaster on stage and
Absolutely.
going to see them. So a lot of your podcasts are the target audience will be Gen Z.
Yes.
But I saw recently that you've internet dads. That's not Gen Z, is it? Or is it?
It is and it isn't. So it technically is, but Spencer and Rory, who are the hosts of that show, it's an idea of creators who are dads, but creators who you've known follow that exact journey, and potentially their audiences followed that exact journey as well, and they are not Gen Z anymore either. We also have Dad v Girls, which is like a family show, and those guys are a little bit older and have had a journey through YouTube. So yeah, we and without giving away any secrets, this year we're planning to explore new avenues and new ventures, maybe some verticals that we haven't got already, whether it be history, business, some other verticals.
So expanding out to different target audiences.
Yeah, definitely.
And then in terms of, so you're obviously a big player in the UK. Would you expand globally, or is
Absolutely, yeah. Some conversations that we've had. There's obviously the UK is where it is. Video podcasting, we were there at the forefront. A lot of people are catching up now, as they should be, with with the state of the industry and where we're in. But there are certainly other places around the world that maybe they are where we were 3 years ago. That it's an emerging market, it's an emerging industry. Maybe there's audio everywhere, but there isn't video everywhere. Yeah. And we're certainly looking at what opportunities around the world, we could go and maybe take advantage of.
Yeah. There's so much competition now for podcasts, and so I've seen a lot of new global podcasts pop up on my timeline. Obviously the BBC has lots of podcasts as well. So is it hard then in the space to fight for competition, or?
We just focus on ourselves. We just focus on, you know, our lane, which right now is Gen Z podcasting. We will, you know, keep an eye on what's coming inbound in terms of like what shows do we want to take on, what is growth for us, who do we want to work with. We've got some really exciting conversations going on right now. I was hoping that maybe the ink had dried on the contract. I could say more about some of the talent we've got coming in, maybe some more traditional talent, but we've still got, you know, tons of exciting shows in the pipeline and not going to stand still by any means.
How do you quantify success?
Well, for us, it's a successful show in that, you know, it's doing well on social. First and foremost, short form, always. Like short form, we believe will bring people back to long form. And again, I know I spoke about Radio Rufus previously. It took a while to get that show, you know, to hit the ground running. But we knew that we had the formula right because last year it was our fastest growing show on TikTok. And went from 0 to 400K in the space of a year from, you know, the short form segments and bits that they were doing. And maybe it didn't translate well and wasn't monetizing for a little while, but now it's at the place where we know we were getting the short form right. It's just a matter of time until people got through and went to the long form. And for us, that's success when we see people going through from the short form to the long form, but short form first and foremost, and we know that the rest will come after that.
And so how many studios do you have?
5 technically.
So it's, you know, it's a growing area. Who then would invest? Have you got investors to?
Yeah, so we did our first and only investment round back in the summer of 2023. It was a close-knit round in terms of, you know, people in the industry that we know very well, whether it be some members of the Sidemen, other top creators in the space, you know, people who believed in our vision and where the industry could go. You know, we don't have any VC firm or anyone else looking over our shoulder. We wanted to, you know, get people involved that would just trust us and leave us to it. And, you know, thankfully they did.
They do. They leave you alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're big names, aren't they?
Yeah, KSI, Sidemen, Will Any, Chris MD, you know, a lot of, you know, other really big YouTubers in the space, and, you know, they had their trust in us, and, you know, thankfully they did.
Yeah, and do they give you advice?
No, we rarely hear from them.
Really?
Yeah, we rarely hear from them. They're very busy with their own stuff.
Yeah, no, they definitely are. So from lockdown to now, like, what's your kind of staffing and how has it expanded?
Yeah, so, I mean, when it was just Cal and Chip and the fellas, it would have been them and their producer, so that was technically 3 people. We're now closing in on 40 in the office. You know, obviously the growth has gone from just the people who would work on the shows themselves, the producers, editors, to, you know, all our support staff now, HR, you know, campaigns team, we've got, you know, our production team, we've got our, you know, studio tech, finance. So yeah, we've got the full shebang now, which is scary at times, but, you know, it's a growth that we've been really happy with, and we've done it gradually, you know, step by step as we've needed to, and yeah, we're very careful of not bloating and doing too much at once.
Definitely. In terms of people who are creating content but they want to get into podcasting, what would your advice be? Just
do it. I think that everyone's got a phone in their pocket, and you can make a podcast with that phone. You know, there's great audio on an iPhone now. You can buy some small kits or a lav mic from Amazon. You know, the camera quality is good enough. You know, if you can get a couple of cameras together so you've got multiple angles, even better. But the barrier to entry has gone down and down and down in terms of, you know, year by year by year. You know, anyone can film a podcast now. Before it was, you know, you can start a podcast audio and just get mics. But now I think anyone can start a video podcast. Anyone can put out short form clips. And, you know, especially on TikTok with the algorithms and YouTube Shorts as well, you can get views quite easily. And if you're creating content that's good enough, you'll bring people back to your long form. So, yeah, if anyone isn't doing it already but was thinking about it, just take that leap, because a lot of the time the barrier is the cringe barrier. It's are you willing to put stuff out there of yourself doing that thing? And if you can get past the cringe barrier, then you'll be fine.
I haven't heard of the cringe barrier before.
Cringe barrier is a big thing, yeah.
So your journey then to here, so like you're obviously now an expert in podcasting and social media. Was that your background, or what did you do?
Yeah, so I've always worked in social. for the past 10 years or so. Originally brand side, when I was working at Ladbrokes Coral as head of social media, I started a show called The Kickoff. Some people may know about it in this room, may not. It was, the first of its kind live streaming watch along. Every man and his dog has a watch along now, but it was the first of its kind where a number of people would get together, watch maybe the biggest game of the weekend all the way through, 3 hours live, and did really well. So through that, met Callan Ship and other people in the space and really grew that good network. And then from there, of where we are now.
Well done. You've done really well. For everybody, if you check out their website, it's amazing because I always talk about the colour scheme. It's just so poppy and so positive. So the website's thefellowsstudios.com. Is that right? Yeah. So we'll end the chat there. Thank you so much for listening to us, and thank you for all your insights,
Thanks, guys.
Elliot. Elliot Hackney, COO of the Fellows Studios. Thank you.